What's up, people? It's XOX here, and today I just got news on basically Sony trying to reset their entire verse, but the problem is that they're not trying to do anything different with it, and therefore that's just kind of screwing it up on its own right. Like for example, I do think that the problem for the Sony thing is that like the the movies that they made, they flopped. But a lot of, but I feel like one thing people get wrong is that them thinking that, oh, they meant to be the antagonist and don't try to what's wrong with them about to try to make him anti-hero. Yeah, but the problem, I don't think that's really the problem. The problem is that they're trying to do the same thing with Venom, and they're trying to make it work with the other ones, and that's what the real issue is. Because Venom in his own comics, he turns into an anti-hero, so that doesn't really contradict anything about his character. It's just they are trying to do the same thing with the other ones. Now, at least in Morbius' case in his comics, he just turns into an anti-hero, so with him it works. But the only one that just really fucked it up was basically Craven, because Craven, yeah, he doesn't fit that role. Now, if we're talking about Craven, yeah, because he basically never had that type of role to begin with, and nor would I seen it work even in comic format. So that's why when they tried to make it work in a movie, it just didn't work because of that reason. Not because the idea is bad or anything like that, or no, I mean, let's just say the idea just doesn't work for him. It's just they're trying to do the same thing with him, and it just didn't work out, and that's what that really boils down to. They're trying to make him into an anti-hero, but he just, like I said, Craven's not really. He's never had a role like that before, and they're just trying to make something that worked for Venom work on the other ones, and that's where that problem arises from. And then, as for Morbius, I mean, like I said, that movie flopped because, well, a lot of reasons. That movie didn't pan out too well because of the fact that they didn't really. It, I guess I'll just say you probably need a better director, and probably just the fact that Jared Leto doesn't exactly make things work out so well. He underperformed, unfortunately. I don't know if it did worse than Madam Web, but that's debatable. And Madam Web is, I mean, that one just didn't really help it too much. And then it doesn't even help from, I remember from an old resource where they were going to turn him into a Sinister Six, which wouldn't have made sense because she's not even a part of that. But, I mean, that's just them messing things up. It's like the guys at Sony decided to do their own thing and not try to really pan out to what actually works instead of just simply, putting down ones that actually don't, mess up or at least work in that format, like ones that actually do work in the format. And they just messed her up on a fundamental level in that movie. That's all I gotta say for that one. Because I'll say this real quick, like the last two Venom movies, I mean, the last one I'll say, to be honest, that one it was just average, but it wasn't terrible. And the second one, it was a fun ride, especially with having Woody Harrelson as Carnage, Cletus Cassidy, aka Carnage. But it wasn't like a total wreck. Plus, it had been a long time since before Carnage had been, or the first time Carnage had ever been a movie. But at the same time, the Venom movies aren't. I would say they're not. Didn't do as bad as the other Sony movies, and that kind of goes to one point with like they're just trying to make what work with Venom work with the other ones, and it just didn't. At least for Morbius and or more specifically Craven's case, because Craven's never really been that kind of role, or to even be that kind of, or to even be a protagonist in the first place. So they just try to make that work with him, and it just didn't. That format doesn't work with Craven. But yeah, my final thoughts on this whole thing is basically like what it is that because I know people keep saying that the problem is that, oh, they're trying to make the antagonist, like the villain antagonist, like anti-heroes. Like that's not really the problem, because I I can actually name some where they go on a different path and then it works just fine. It doesn't mess up nothing, actually. As a matter of fact, it works out just good. Especially the lesser known villain that I know named what's his name? The Beetle, which I'm pretty sure you guys don't know, and I'm not talking about Blue Beetle either. Abner Jenkins, like he was a villain. He was a villain antagonist from Spider-Man, and he has redemption arc, and since then he just stayed stayed in the redemption arc thing after that new name. It became, you know, a hero, and it just stayed that way afterwards. So It didn't contradict nothing. And like I said, if it can work like that for him, then it can work for, these guys, especially Venom in his comics. Like, he has several comic books where he stars as protagonist, as an anti-hero, where he leans more towards being an anti-hero. What do you think there's a comic of him called Lethal Protector? It's just that, unfortunately, folks just think that's what makes the world more. I know it's nowadays people, I mean, it's just a quick rant, but I know that nowadays people just don't, like, now it's like they just want them to stay as villains. They don't want to just mix it up, mix the story up a little bit. They just kind of want to just stay one way. That makes it kind of lighter and stale. But anyway, like I said, I don't really have a problem with the idea of, like, especially ones that are meant to be anti-heroes, especially comics like Venom himself. It's just they're trying to make that same format work with Craven, and they're trying to do it the exact same way, and it just doesn't work. That's all. Like, that's why the first movie did just fine. The second one could have been better, and the third one was just average. It wasn't terrible, it was just average. But I do think it could have been better. And I don't think the problem is, like I said, I don't think the problem is because, like I said, because those folks who haven't read the Venom comics, they don't understand that his comic books that he later on gets is like where he stars in it. He's an anti-hero. It works out just fine for him. So therefore, he can mix up the format, and he does lean more towards that role. He doesn't stay just purely antagonistic, which is why it works. And then, like I already said, Craven, Morbius. Well, in Morbius' case, like I said, same thing with him. He does become an anti-hero, but it's just that it just doesn't. It's just the way they execute in the movie. That's why it didn't work out. The way they execute in the movie. That's why it didn't work out. And like I already said, Craven, he just never had that shit in the first place. He didn't make sense. I mean, even the moment I heard Craven, I was like, okay, yeah, this is gonna flop because Craven's never had a role like that before, and they're just trying to put him in something that just doesn't fit his character. That's what that was. And again, like I said, the problem isn't them trying to make villains into anti-heroes or whatever, anti-villains. The problem is that they're trying to do the formula for Venom and then try to throw it onto the other ones, and it just doesn't work like that. And like I already said, Venom, he's not like in his comics, he doesn't just stay as antagonist. No, he does become an anti-hero in later comics. It's like I swear nowadays, it's like people just want to see villains be villains and they don't want to see them do anything else different. I swear. I remember a time where people complain about them not having enough character. Now they complain about them not being evil. Oh boy. Well, times have changed, sadly. Maybe not for the better. But again, that's my thing on that. Like I said, Venom, him being an anti-hero in a movie works. Because like I said, in the comic books, he had that and they sell just fine. So I can see why in the movie format it works just fine. It's just the last two, he just didn't do as good as the job they did with the first one. Out of all of them, I would say that the first Venom movie didn't do as bad as the Sony movies. But if they're going to reset the Sony movies and do the same problem, that's just counterproductive. So, with that being said, like, subscribe, and see you guys later. Peace.